Welcome to 1984 Law and our brief exploration of the social hierarchy of George Orwell's dystopian world. 1984 is set in Oceania, specifically Airstrip 1, formerly known as Great Britain, and mostly within London. Here amongst the rundown ancient buildings that house the masses, tower four vast pyramidal structures, the four ministries of the ruling party. Within these work the men and women of the party who make up around 15% of the total population and who are, in theory, the upper strata of the society. Winston Smith himself works in the Ministry of Truth, rectifying documents to conform to the current party line, and is a member of the so-called Outer Party. The party itself is divided into two broad groups, the Outer and Inner Party, and we shall descend from the highest echelons to the lowest as we move on. Oceania, as explored in our video on the geopolitics of 1984, is a huge superstate that consists of Britain, the Americas, Australia, Southern Africa, and other territories. Its ruler, and at the summit of its hierarchical pyramid, is Big Brother. Big Brother is the head of state and guide of the party, who, at least superficially, rules as a godlike and revered dictator. Big Brother, commonly referred to as BB, supposedly existed as a leader of the party from its earliest days, and rose to unquestioned primacy before Winston's time. BB is at the centre of a pervasive cult of personality, which is explained as useful for the party, given feelings of reverence and love are more easily directed towards a person than a faceless institution like the party itself. Given BB is never actually seen, and the explanation of his function in the in-universe book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, it's likely he does not actually exist. Big Brother heads the so-called Inner Party that makes up just 2% of Oceanian society. Just below the summit of the hierarchical pyramid, it's likely that various inner party members occupy de facto positions of power above and beyond most others. We know that, at least earlier on, according to party law, other leaders did occupy leadership positions, almost at a level with BB himself. Emmanuel Goldstein, another figure whose existence is questionable, was certainly at this level, though by the year of the plot he had become an enemy of the state and was expelled from the party long ago. However, even so, this does show that other prominent leaders did and perhaps still do exist at the top levels of the inner party, though by 1984 under the unquestioned overall leadership of BB himself. Jones, Aronson and Rutherford are three other such individuals that are named and must have been high-level members of the inner party, as they are pictured at a party function in New York, and are in the middle of the group with their names captioned in a Times article. It must be a precarious, if powerful, position to hold in the upper echelons of the inner party, as these three men were purged in the 1960s. We can infer that O'Brien is around this level within the inner party too, as he later reveals he participated in the interrogation and curing of these three prominent men. O'Brien also collaborated in writing Goldstein's book, presumably not a task given to just any party member, or perhaps even one of the inner party. Another named and purged individual who likely occupied a high-ranking position in this upper level of the inner party is a comrade named Withers. Withers headed an organisation called FFCC that supplied cigarettes and other comforts to the sailors of the floating fortresses. Withers too is prominent enough to be specially mentioned by Big Brother himself in another Times article, and even awarded the Order of Conspicuous Merit Second Class for his work. Winston is tasked with changing the article, given that Withers is now an unperson, that is, vaporised, theorises that Big Brother may have ordered his disgrace and vaporisation given his popularity in the party. As with any ruling elite then, It's clear that purges and political rivalries exist even within the stringent and devoted ranks of the upper levels of the inner party. As a broad class, the inner party make up the rough upper class of Oceanian society, all members presumably occupying a form of leadership position. We can theorise that such positions include heads of important committees, heads of departments within the ministries, high-ranking military officers, members of the thought police, and perhaps the more prominent orators. Winston describes them as directing brains. As the rough upper class of Oceanian society, you might suppose they live in luxury. However, compared to the ruling classes of other times and societies, the inner party member actually lives a relatively Spartan life. They are certainly just as scrutinised for signs of heresy and thought crime, if not more so, given their positions at the top of society. Materially speaking, they are better off than the other classes. Significant differences in the quality of their food, personal possessions, the quality of their clothing, etc., do unquestionably set them apart from even outer party members, let alone proles. Julia shows Winston some stolen goods procured by servants of inner party households, which include real coffee, sugar, as well as white bread and jam, delicacies not enjoyed by outer party members who must make do with poor substitutes like saccharin for sugar and vile-tasting artificial coffee. Inner party members also live in large, spacious apartments in cleaner areas, as showcased when Winston visited O'Brien. O'Brien, as a member of his class, also has the conspicuous privilege of being able to switch off the telescreen in his apartment for small amounts of time, and serves Winston and Julia wine, something Winston has only dreamed of sampling beforehand. O'Brien too, as is normal for a member of the inner party, also has at least one servant named Martin, though Goldstein's book makes clear each inner party member has around 2 or 3. Private transport is also a normal perk of this oligarchical class, with members effectively owning cars and even helicopters. So how does one become a member of the inner party? Well, if you are a member of the unwashed masses known as the proles, then you're out of luck, as in principle there's very little movement between the classes, though some movement, as we shall soon explain, is allowed. Generally, no prole is allowed admittance into either branch of the party. However, if it was required for some reason, the party would certainly select from the class in extreme circumstances to repopulate itself. Children of party members are examined at the age of 16, though it's not stated in detail what this examination involves. We can put our speculative hat on and reasonably be sure that such an examination is not purely intellectual. Yes, the examined are likely vigorously vetted for signs of potential heretical tendencies, with only the most solid, good thinkful specimens considered for admittance into the inner party elite. I suspect too that other tests are designed to weed out those of a weak constitution or temperament. Perhaps 16-year-old party kids are given their own Room 101-like scenario, where they are tasked with killing or purging a subject to prove their devotion to BB and party ideals. However, I must stress this is purely speculation on my part. What we definitely do know is that birth, race and gender play no part in selection to the inner party. Quote, "Nor is there any racial discrimination or any marked domination of one province by another. Jews, Negroes, South Americans of pure Indian blood are to be found in the highest ranks of the party, and the administrators of any area are always drawn from the inhabitants of that area." This system of admittance is actually useful in maintaining the power of the party, and particularly the inner party itself, as it allows the more suitable and ambitious elements of the outer party to rise into the inner party, while also presumably excluding those children of inner party members deemed weak or unsuitable in some other way to rule. Logically, since we know that proles are not admitted into either branch of the party as a rule, we can assume that membership of the party at a broader level is hereditary. Broadly, children of party members become party members, though those who fail even to qualify at the outer party level are presumably exiled into the ranks of the proletariat or even eliminated. The outer party is much larger than the inner party, comprising about 13% of the total population of Oceania. In the book, they are likened to the hands of the society, while the inner party is the brain. As with the inner party, it's reasonable to assume that the outer party also has strata within it too. Though all party members are in theory equal and referred to as comrades, some stations and jobs are likely more sought after than others. Winston himself works in the records department at the Ministry of Truth. His job is to rectify public records to conform to current party dictates and thought. All skilled jobs are likely taken by outer party members, under the direction of inner party members, of course. Some positions require no particular skill or intelligence, however, a fact we know from Winston's description of Parsons. The outer party arguably occupies the worst level of the Oceanian hierarchy, though they are in theory a rough middle class. They are materially set apart from both the inner party and the proles beneath them for different reasons. While comrades do usually have their own flats, they are dilapidated and dirty compared to the dwellings of inner party members, though very likely better than the dwellings of proles in general. Winston also demonstrates he has the money to indulge himself at times. He purchases the paperweight on a whim from Mr. Charrington. He can also afford to rent the room above Mr. Charrington's shop. All this while Winston himself admits that around a quarter of an outer party member's income must be earmarked for voluntary donations. Winston also purchases the services of a prostitute, though this appears to be a relatively rare expense. It's safe to say then that, monetarily, the outer party is set above the prole class too. Outer party members also possess a social status apart from the proles. At least two characters refer to Winston as a gent or gentleman, Mr. Charrington and the old prole in the pub. To link this more clearly to social status, the old man also describes a higher class man with whom he had had an altercation as a gent too. In addition, two prole women quieten and eye Winston with hostility as he passes, Winston thinking that the sight of the blue overalls of a party member must be rare in that part of town. Despite all of this, however, the outer party, as the class with the intellect and power, if unmanaged, to overthrow the inner party, is heavily monitored and controlled. Telescreens are installed in homes to both bombard listeners with constant state propaganda and announcements, while it also records the inhabitant. Telescreens also dog almost every movement of outer party members, with large screens in public places as well as screens in workplaces. Hidden microphones are also ubiquitous. Julia theorizes that though no telescreen likely exists in their first hiding place, there may still be microphones among the trees, even in a remote spot outside of London. As befits a totalitarian society like Oceania, all aspects of the outer party's life is scrutinized, from facial expressions to the gait and way a person walks, or even how a back looks. Any indication of thought crime or eccentricity will likely be noted and the offending individual arrested for processing in the Ministry of Love or transferred to a forced labour camp. Another aspect of life rigidly controlled is personal relationships. Given the outer party is heavily infiltrated with spies and surveillance, it's practically impossible for friendships or any close relationships to form based on a mutual distrust between any two individuals. We can see this in the relationship between Winston and Syme. Though the two get along, especially when Winston can get him to focus on the subject of newspeak, Syme's area of expertise, Winston is also perfectly aware that even a slight indication of his own heresy and hatred of Big Brother would cause his friend to denounce him immediately and without thought. In the intimate realm, things are no better. Party girls are conditioned to merely submit to husbands without enjoyment or love. The sole purpose of marriage is to beget children for service to Big Brother and the party. A love affair in the heavily controlled class of the outer party is almost unthinkable given the risks. Any deviation from the strict rules on relationships results in arrest and likely eventual death for both thought and sex crime. Even the natural bonds between children and parents are warped to serve the interests of the party and social cohesion. Children are routinely inducted into the spies, where they are taught to suspect adults, and especially their own parents. A full dedication to Big Brother and the party is built in them, and many children end up denouncing parents or relatives suspected of heretical tendencies. With relationships and sex closed off from them, outer party members are also totally managed on a physical level, with very little time to think or partake in any activity not involving the party in some way. Daily exercise regimes are normal. An outer party member's time is mostly monopolised by mandatory voluntary services, such as Julia's posting of anti-sex league posters across London in her free time, or Parsons preparing his housing block's decorations for Hate Week. Lectures, community activities and voluntary work, apart from their normal job, take up a broad swathe of an outer party member's time, leaving them very little opportunity to think too deeply on anything, let alone partake in an activity not related to the party. We can almost certainly assume that curfews are in place too. Movement, even within provinces, is also monitored for outer party members. Winston feels uncomfortable even roving the streets of London apart from his usual route home, noting that patrols generally look for party members in prol districts and will demand their papers and an explanation for their presence there. The outer party to which Winston Smith belongs is thus the most heavily oppressed level of Oceanian society, though it's important to stress that members of the inner party are not immune from the demands of their society either. Finally, at the base of the hierarchical pyramid of Oceanian society are the proles. Short for proletarians, these are the vast majority, or around 85% of citizens. These men and women do the menial and low-paying jobs and live in even more horrid material conditions than the average party member. Such is the poverty of prole society that Winston notes that there are many women of the class willing to sell themselves even for a bottle of gin. Proles are broadly described as the low in Goldstein's book, the lower class of Oceanian society. Winston explains that they generally live in large families, mostly marrying young. They are middle-aged by 30 and generally die around the age of 60. Quote, heavy physical work, the care of home and children, petty quarrels with neighbours, films, football, beer, and above all gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not difficult. A few agents of the Fort Police moved always among them, spreading false rumours, marking down and eliminating the few individuals who were judged capable of becoming dangerous. Proles are judged as politically harmless and so not as rigidly controlled by the party. Few proles have telescreens in their homes. It's implied by Mr. Charrington that they are available to them, as he deems them too expensive when Winston points out he doesn't have one. They are to an extent still subject to party control through propaganda. They can generally be relied upon to congregate at public executions and events, a primitive patriotism and hatred stirred in them by constant moulding of public consciousness in the media. All forms of media are totally controlled by the party. Even songs gleefully and ignorantly chanted by proles are created artificially, and even the lowest kind of porn is mechanically created, distributed among the proles, though the consumers are mostly deluded into thinking such things are illegal and illicit. Since all news and contact with foreigners is heavily controlled, the masses have no definitive standard of comparison with which to gauge their own condition. They are also broadly uneducated and without general ideas on which to fixate, even when they are riled up into discontentment sometimes. Though they live in crushing poverty then, the proles are deemed mostly beneath suspicion. Another key form of control is fear. War is continuous, with the proles constantly hit by rocket bombs, which Julia suspects are fired by the government of Oceania itself. Indeed, this seems tacitly confirmed when attacks actually increase up to hate week. These attacks keep this crushed class in a constant state of fear. It stokes hatred for the enemies supposedly behind the attacks, while also driving their devotion to Big Brother and patriotism towards their own state. Though materially much worse off than party members at both levels, it's clear proles enjoy a near normal degree of freedoms. Unlike marriage between party members, divorce is acceptable among proles. In fact, promiscuity is unimportant among them, in stark contrast to the sexual puritanism of the party. Even religious worship would have been permitted if they needed it. Proles appear to be a society apart, though it's probably more proper to apply this label to the smaller party structure apart from it. Criminality is rife, quote, a whole world within a world of thieves, bandits, prostitutes, drug peddlers and racketeers of every description existed. As with other characteristics of prole society, even this criminality is ignored by the party, the civil police only lightly managing the population, and even, it seems, favouring the prole criminals above the party ones. Winston noting later on that a hierarchy existed within the forced labour camps too, with a sort of aristocracy formed by the worst prole criminals and all the dirty jobs performed by the party members. Proles are allowed to largely live self-governed, adhering to their own codes of conduct, being born, living, breeding and dying under the apathetic rule of the party. So, there we have it, the broad structure of Oceanian society. What do you think? Would you rather live as a prole than a member of the party? Let us know in the comments, and remember, Big Brother is watching you.